Hello and welcome, Breakthrough Success listeners. I'm your host, Mark Guberti, and this is the podcast where you'll learn how to achieve the breakthroughs you've been looking for in your business and life. If you want to grow your content brand, you'll definitely want to add my latest book, Content Marketing Secrets, to your reading list. This book will teach you how to create, promote, and optimize your content for growth and revenue. You can get your copy at Mark Guberti, that is Mark with a C. So markguberti.com/book. And now, let's dive right into the show. For episode 80 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast, we are going to talk about succeeding as a millennial entrepreneur with our guest, Stephen Van Cohen. Stephen's entrepreneurial journey started in 2011 when he turned a $3,000 investment into a $3 million global consulting company. He recently launched his second company, 21 Mil, an online platform built to develop millennial professionals. 21 Mil is the first ever micro-learning platform built to help young professionals succeed in the workplace. And now, it is my pleasure to welcome Stephen to the show.
Hey, it is my pleasure to be here. How are you doing?
Stephen, it is a pleasure to have you on the Breakthrough Success Podcast. And before we dive deeper, I really love to get some backstory about how you started 21 Mil. So can you just walk us through why you started 21 Mil and what that was like?
Yeah, so like all great ideas, this idea came to me when I was in the shower. And really the concept kind of started to form about 2 years before my breakthrough aha moment when I was getting cleaned up in the shower. And I had spent about 5 years training thousands of people all over the world when it comes to leadership and development. And a lot of the pain points and obstacles that I was working through with some of my clients had to do with what's called the generation gap, right? So how do we account for these new professionals coming into the workplace? Because there seems to be quite a disconnect between the current cultural norms and what these young millennials are looking for from employers. And I spent a lot of time working with my clients to basically develop the right culture and the right tools and the right resources to account for some of the needs of their new millennial staff. And in the shower that day, it dawned on me that I've been doing so much work around helping clients cater to, these young professionals, but what am I doing to help these young professionals find success in their role? And after doing about 2 weeks of research, figuring out as many things as I can figure out online from a millennial training standpoint, I just did not see anything that was out there. And I jumped on the concept of creating a platform to help young professionals grow their skill sets so they can sharpen their saws and be as successful as possible. And that was about 1.5 years ago, and it's just gone gangbusters ever since.
Stephen, thank you for sharing the backstory behind 21 Mil. And one of the things that is different for millennial entrepreneurs is that some people see the young age as a limitation, especially when they're getting started. And you've talked about this in other places, the youngest in the room obstacle. And for millennials listening, how can we not use things like age as limitations? And this could apply to other limitations as well, but I also like to focus on age from the millennial point of view.
So I'll tell you a quick story. I got my first consulting job when I was 24. And the consulting job I got was to work for an international gold mining company. And up to this point in my career, I have not had any experience or exposure to mining. So I moved from Chicago, which is where I'm from, to a small little town in Nevada. And I was tasked with basically training all of these different supervisors in an environment that I was completely unfamiliar with. And I was super nervous because I didn't really speak the language. I didn't have a whole lot of confidence, going in to do this work. I'd really not done a lot of this work up to this point in my career. And I remember really thinking about how do I show up and what do I do? And what I decided to really focus on, more so than me sharing what I knew about leadership and about the concepts I was teaching in my workshops, I really focused on the individual's experience and leaned on what they know to teach me. And then through more of a facilitation mechanism, was able to help fill in some of the blanks with what I knew. And I think for millennials, especially millennials who are newer to the organization, we tend to like come in with all these great different ideas. We're a creative generation. We're really innovative and we see things in a different perspective. And we're so focused on wanting to share what we know. Sometimes, we lose sight of taking a step back and really learning from the older people in the organization and then filling in the blanks when and where we can. So I think for me, taking that approach early on in my career to learn from others and really put their knowledge and experience before mine really kind of set the right tone and allowed us to build a really good foundation for our relationship. And then as they started to trust me and, get more familiar with me, and as they started to see, hey, this guy's actually pretty smart, he's got some interesting things to say, my, platform became a lot more opportunistic. And I was able to really have more leverage with sharing my ideas and have them be, received in a more positive light.
Stephen, thank you for sharing those insights on how we cannot use things like age as a limitation. And I'd like to advance to the next stage of that, which is from limitation to people are coming to you with their questions and wanting your advice, like even at a young age. So how do we not only use age as a limitation, which is what we previously talked about, but come to a point where age is just a number and people who have been in the business or whatever we're doing for 30 years are coming to us for advice?
So the technique that I use personally is, well, first of all, some backstory. I'm a huge nerd and I love reading. I love going through and figuring out different studies and different models and different concepts associated really with my profession, leadership and organizational success. So I have a lot of nuggets, is what I guess I'll call them, with regards to studies I can reference and examples I can use from some of my favorite books. And I tend to lean more on proven methodologies that have substance versus just speaking from my own perspective. And I think really early on, that was useful because I would be able to talk about, The Progress Principle, which is a great book by Teresa Amabile. And in the trainings that I was leading, instead of me just sharing my insights and thoughts, I would reference examples from this book. And I was able to talk to it pretty intelligently. And from those examples and from having a proven resource kind of at my backing, people tend to listen, right? Because it wasn't just me talking about what I think. It was more established research and more proven methodologies that people tend to listen at a little bit more confident kind of high level. So I think that's a little bit about how to not, focus on your age. If you know what you're talking about and you have something to back it up, then people are definitely going to give you the time of day.
Stephen, thank you for sharing those insights on how we can become experts and people come to us and age is truly just a number. And while age is just a number, you do have to understand there are certain differences within each generation. Each generation, for instance, has its strengths and weaknesses. And you mentioned creativity earlier being a top strength that millennials have. And I'm wondering if you could just share with us any other unique strengths that millennials have and how they can harness those strengths.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I'm a millennial myself. I'm what's called a cusper because I'm 33. So I'm right on the cusp of being between a millennial and a Gen Xer. But I definitely resonate more with millennials. And if I had to choose some of the core strengths that our generation possesses above and beyond creativity, I would say being able to utilize and understand our resources. So we do a good job of leveraging the technology and the resources that we have access to in order to get things done. That's definitely something that is shaking up a lot of organizations. I mean, we want solutions like yesterday versus, the current state where it's kind of more monotonous and slow moving and you do a lot more planning and thinking. We definitely want to get stuff done and we know how to get stuff done by using our resources. So that would be one. our generation is the most educated generation in history. So if you look at the number of people who, graduated from college and have gone on to get masters and doctorates, we have a lot of formal education, and that formal education definitely transfers into the workplace. So being able to lean on a lot of the things we've learned through our studies, I think is a great asset. The other really kind of good asset that we possess as a generation is we've been much more conditioned to work in teams. So like when I was a kid, I, played youth soccer, and through high school, I was in all kinds of different activities and groups, and my mom was a part of a play group. So when I was a little baby, I had all these friends that, the mom started to bring together and play with. And I think we're really naturally used to being around others, and we know how to work with others because we have a lot of experience with it. So, how to work in teams that can be leveraged in an organization. So there's a lot of things that we bring to the table that I think are really valuable assets that organizations can tap into when they think about how to best use our skill sets.
And I agree that millennial skill set is very important for a workplace, but different sources where you turn, non-millennials are having a difficult time hiring millennials and creating a working atmosphere for them. And there are different articles that say things like that. That just seems to be the general trend. And with that in mind, I'm wondering, how can non-millennials get better at working with millennials?
Yeah, I get that question. So the work I do with our clients, that's probably the most consistent question, because it almost feels like someone has to give, right? Like if I'm a baby boomer or a Gen Xer, I want the millennials to conform to our preferred way of doing business. And then on the flip side, we have a generation who's not scared to say, well, if I'm not going to get my needs met, I'm just going to go somewhere else, right? So there's almost this like really thin line that both sides are trying to kind of tightrope, walk across. So I don't have the answer. I think it's important to share some statistics, right? Like when you think about the millennial population in just the number of years, in 5 years, 75% of the entire workforce is going to be millennial professionals. So it's kind of inevitable that organizations need to start changing the way they do business to account for our needs and our expectations. And I also think a lot of the resources and a lot of the expectations that millennials cite as being really important are just good business practices. So Deloitte did this really awesome study, and they found out that some of the most important things that millennials seek is flexible work schedules, which I think is just, it makes sense. As long as you get your work done, it shouldn't matter if you're working a 9 to 5 or if you're working, later into the evening or earlier in the morning. Millennials really want to have lots of opportunities for growth and development. They put a huge importance on training. So, organizations, if you look across the board, the organizations who invest more in training have higher returns with their stock prices and tend to be industry leaders. So there's no disadvantage really for, promoting an organization that leverages training. So I think catering to that need from a millennial standpoint is great. And then the other big one is millennials want mentors. They want coaches. They really want to be really good at, what they do. And that's also an asset, in my opinion, to have people who are striving to be really great at whatever their tasks are. And I am a believer that you should provide those coaches and mentors and supervisors and leaders that can really help, get people to the next level with their career. So when it comes to what do Gen Xers and baby boomers do to make sure that they're accounting, for some of the millennials coming into the workplace, I really think it's a matter of just putting some of those needs that they've set forth into place, because it's just good business, in my opinion.
Stephen, thank you for sharing with us how non-millennials can get better at working with millennials. And back in the introduction, which seems like a long time ago, I talked about how you turned a $3,000 investment into a $3 million global consulting company, and how you launched your second company as well. So with that in mind, how did you specifically achieve success as a millennial entrepreneur?
I would say the biggest asset or the biggest opportunity that led to the success was timing. I know a lot of research has been done to figure out what is the key indicator for startups to be successful, and timing is usually at the top. And for my first business, which is called Maven was just the right time at the right place. Up until we started our business, the industry didn't put a lot of stock or importance on training. And as soon as we started our company, organizations in our industry started to take notice that, hey, we actually have a leadership gap and we're not giving our people the right tools to be successful. And companies started to really invest heavily in outside training initiatives. And specifically in the industry that we were working in, there just wasn't a lot of providers doing what we were doing. So we ended up eating up a lot of the market really, really early on. So timing is crucial. The other big thing that has led to our success is being able to continuously evolve. If you look at the core part of our business 7 years ago, it's very different from the core part of our business going into 2018. We've definitely modified based a lot on what we've learned from our clients' needs. So I think it's an ever evolving process. When you have a business plan, that's really good to be able to have context, but you have to be able to shift. There's a book called Built to Change, which is a really great construct on understanding that your organization has to be flexible because your market conditions are going to definitely ebb and flow. So you need to be able to ebb and flow with it. So we've done a really good job of that. The other thing we've done a really good job of is providing lots of value to our clients. So we've been able to grow and scale by bringing on more projects with our core group of clients versus really just going after a bunch of new clients. So if you look at year one, we did about 600,000 worth of business. Year two, we did 1.2. So we doubled, and we doubled with all the same clients, right? And when we tripled, we only added on 2 more clients. So I think there's a lot of emphasis in being able to get it right with the clients you have versus trying to just go after anyone and everyone who might be interested. So those would be, I guess, some of the key things. And then with regards to 21 mil, timing also has played a role into it. I mean, if you go online and do a search for millennials in the workplace, there's definitely no shortage of articles that talk about, the struggles and obstacles that millennials are facing. And it's been really cool because we started our business just a year ago, and without any formal marketing, without any kind of formal sales, we've been able to bring on some huge clients who have basically just come across our business from doing Google searches. So, right time, right place is definitely been key to our success for both companies.
Stephen, thank you for sharing with us how you specifically achieved success as a millennial entrepreneur. And throughout your journey, you've definitely faced some hurdles. We'll ask more specifically about those later, but part of achieving success is being able to reach your full potential that you define at that moment, and then you set a higher standard for yourself later. So with that in mind, what do you believe holds most people back from reaching their full potential?
I think it's a lack of understanding. I don't think we as a human race do a good enough job of being truly introspective, right? So a lot of times for my clients, we go through and put them in a personality profile, like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC. There's all kinds of different profiles. And it's amazing to see the reactions from people reading a profile about themselves, right? After taking 15 minutes to answer a questionnaire, and the insights that they learn from these 15-minute questionnaires, it's literally life-changing, right? And some of the people that I work with are in their 40s and 50s, and they've never really taken time to understand what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are and how they show up and how they communicate. And I think people who tend to really focus on who they are and what they're good at and what they like to do are the people who can find the majority of success in whatever it is they decide to do. And, for me, I've always known I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like many entrepreneurs, I have 20 businesses that I can reference over the course of my life, even, from when I was a kid. And as soon as I learned that I was really good at getting people excited, and I was really good at coming up with ideas, and I was really good at sales, and I was really good at, product development, it just made sense for me to start the businesses that I've started. But for most people, they don't know enough about themselves. They don't know what skills that they should leverage, and they don't take the time to really understand what they should be doing, right? Marcus Buckingham says, in order to be successful, you need to align your skills and your passions. And most people don't know what their skills are or what their passions are. And until you figure out those two things, it's going to be really hard to be successful in whatever you do, let alone, being an entrepreneur, which in my opinion is one of the most difficult routes that you can go down professionally.
Stephen, thank you for sharing with us what you believe holds most people back from reaching their full potential. And I really agree about aligning your skills with your passions, because that's definitely going to give you the fuel to get through the challenging moments and also help you speed up the process that you use to achieve success. It's still going to take a while, but it definitely goes a lot faster. And part of that, as I mentioned before, is about dealing with the hard times, the challenges that come along. And with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could share with us one big challenge that you faced in your journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
The biggest lesson with my journey. So I would say that I've had to overcome a lot of quick business failures, right? So I think when you look at the longevity of a business, things tend to progress pretty slowly, right? So it takes a while for you to reach an apex and find a lot of success, and then it takes a long time for that to deteriorate until you really need to focus on an exit strategy for your company. And for me personally, with my business Maven, things went from like better than expected to dire straits, and it was because we've unfortunately lost a huge client, and that huge client removed its services unexpectedly due to market conditions. So I think, the lesson for me was being able to, be more proactive with understanding the market conditions. And even though you can't 100% with accuracy pinpoint, what's going to happen, we were so focused on riding the high with regards to the growth and excitement. And we were so focused on hiring people and just taking the momentum and fueling it, to better expand our enterprise, that we kind of lost sight of reality, and we didn't pay attention to the signs that were pretty obvious in retrospect that things were changing. So to be a lot more mindful of the current state, I think to be a lot more focused on the future state. And for me personally, like another lesson is I'm very, very optimistic, like so much so that I think it can blind me at times. And during this period in our business, I thought we could do no wrong. And I had these grand aspirations, and with 100% certainty was positive, we were going to create a $100 million company. And then boom, all of a sudden, our $3 million company, went to under a $1 million company. And I think, my grandiose expectations kind of set me off a little bit, right? So being more grounded, and I think being optimistic is a really good trait for an entrepreneur, because you need to believe that success is coming, but you also need to be practical. And I've been a lot more practical, and I've been a lot more slow moving with my newest business to allow myself to not make the same mistake twice.
Stephen, thank you for sharing with us that big challenge and the powerful lesson that you learned during that challenge. And before this interview started, we talked a little bit about 3 business books that would be a great fit for Breakthrough Success listeners. So I was wondering if you could share with us those 3 great book recommendations so we could add more to our reading lists.
Yeah, you got it. So the first one is called The Power of Habit. The Power of Habit was written by a guy named Charles Duhigg, and really it's about understanding the routines that we do on a daily basis, and how to change those routines so we can get out of good habits and get out of bad habits and turn them into good habits. The second book is a book called Originals, and Originals is really focused for those who are interested in being an entrepreneur. And Adam Grant, he is the author, and he talks about some of the interesting ways that really successful entrepreneurs have found success that kind of go against what we would think as like common sense business. And there's some really good examples, like Warby Parsons is a good example of how they created their business using a structure that at the time probably would not have been recommended, but in turn ended up creating a lot of success for that company. And then the last one is a book called Switch: How to Change When Change is Hard. So my master's degree is in organizational development. How do you create change within humans, which in turn, create change in organizations? And there's a lot of methods and there's a lot of theories around change. And this book is really brilliant because it breaks it down into 3 parts: the path, the rider, and the elephant. And when you can understand the role the rider, the path, and the elephant play in change, it makes change a lot more manageable. And I think it's a really good read. So that's by Dan and Chip Heath. And those would be my 3 book recommendations.
Stephen, thank you for sharing those 3 great book recommendations. And before we get to the part where you share with Breakthrough Success listeners where they find you on the web, I've asked you several questions throughout this interview. And now I invite you to ask us all questions. So what is one question that you believe we need to be asking ourselves more often?
I would say the questions that you would want to ask yourself is, what did I love doing today? And being able to actually document what those things are. So you talked about agreeing with me that aligning your skills and your passions is a great way to find success. There's only one way to figure out what that is, right? It's to ask yourself, what motivated me today? What got me in a state of flow today? And once you start to understand those things, you can build upon them. The next big one is, how do I show up around other people? So when it comes to how you communicate, or when it comes to how you handle conflict, or when it comes to how you approach problems, taking the time to understand how you show up as an individual. Again, I think we're not as introspective as we should be. So that would be a great question. And then the next question is, do I believe that I will achieve the things I want to achieve? And I'm a huge believer in the power of your subconscious brain. And, studies show that the majority of things we do, 95% of which come from our subconscious kicking in. And unless we know what we want to do, and unless we believe that we are going to achieve the things we want to achieve, I really don't think we're going to be able to do that. So I guess those would be 3 questions that you can ask yourself on a regular basis to kind of do a self-assessment and figure out if you're on the right track.
Stephen, thank you for sharing those questions we can use to conduct that self-assessment, and for sharing all of your great insights throughout this interview. And before we put this interview to a close, for all the Breakthrough Success listeners wondering, where can we find you on the web?
You can find me in 2 places. One is you can go and hit me up on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is Stephen Van Cohen. Van Cohen is VANCOHEN. And then my email is Steve with the letter C at 21mil.com. Or if you just go to 21mil.com and click on the About, you'll see a little bio, and my email address is in there as well. So I encourage anyone to follow up. I definitely love to share as much insight as I possibly can, especially when it comes to young professionals. And I look forward to being a resource.
All right, Breakthrough Success listeners, you can get those links and the show notes at markguberti.com/E80. Stephen, it was such a pleasure to have you on the Breakthrough Success podcast.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much.
To never miss an episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on whatever player you are using. If you are a regular listener and haven't done so already, I would greatly appreciate it if you could give this podcast a review or a rating. 2 ways you could do this are through markguberti.com/iTunes or markguberti.com/Stitcher. That ends this episode. Don't forget, dream big, achieve greatness, and unlock your potential today. Want your tweets get retweeted to my 360,000 Twitter followers?
All you have to do is say something nice about the Breakthrough Success Podcast and include the link markguberry.com/iTunes. Once you've posted that tweet, email me, mark@markguberry.com, and I will retweet your tweet to my 360,000 followers. This podcast is a production done by Mark Guberti. For more insights, head on over to markguberti.com.